Now let's take a look at solid principles in koel, open source repository, music streaming service in Laravel and Vue.js, really popular with 12,000 stars on GitHub. And inside I want to show you the structure of services and repositories. And for some of you it may sound like an overkill and over-engineering, but it's such a beautiful separation of concerns. So for example, if you go to almost any controller, so for example, album cover controller, I don't know immediately what it does, but it's all readable. So there is a service which is injected via constructor. So there is media metadata service, which is used all over the controller, which in this case is only one method, but still. So metadata service is responsible for everything that controller needs to know. Controller needs to just call that service and then call the event that library has changed and return the response. Now look at individual parts of that controller stuff. First, write album cover is a method of that service, and it takes care of, well, writing album cover, whatever that means. And controller doesn't need to know about what it does, it just needs to throw the parameters at it. And even inside that write album cover, separation goes even deeper. So destination, where to write something, generate album cover path. It's a one-line method because the logic is quite complex, so they didn't want to clutter the method of write album cover. So that's one separation. Another separation, image writer. What is image writer? There's some class which takes care of writing images, I suppose. So again, that's separated to another layer. What does it do? Image writer, write from binary data, probably create image. Image save. Yeah, something like that. So image saver is a separate class. Let's go back. Then delete album cover files, another method. Then create thumbnail for album, another method. So everything is separated into methods, which is like 10 or 20 lines max, and it's all readable. All the names here are pretty much doing what it says. And if we go back to the controller, also these things. So request is not just request file or request something. There's a method get file content as binary string, which takes care of base64 decode. And there's also a method request get file extension. So to not repeat that in other controllers or to not put that logic in the controller at all, there's a request file. It's actually a request file, not even a service. So it's an abstract class extending request. And we didn't talk much about abstract classes in this course, but abstract classes is almost the same as the interface, except they can implement something. It's not just the rules. It's abstract class with the rules with the default implementation. So we go back to the controller and look again how short the controller is, and controller doesn't know what is happening under the hood. Controller just takes care of controlling the request and the response. Now let's take a look at another example of repositories which are used with services and with traits. It may sound pretty complex, but stay with me here. Let's take a look. So there's an artisan command called koel tidy to tidy up the library by deleting empty artists and albums. And notice that everything is clickable here. So with all the type hints, all the types here and here everywhere, I can click almost everywhere in my PHP Storm. So for example, this media sync service tidy. What is media sync service? It's a private variable of that comment. So we go to the class itself, and inside of that class we find tidy method. And here we have album repository and artist repository. And there is a method get non-empty album IDs. And here's where we land to the repository. Album repository extends abstract repository. So we go even deeper. There's abstract repository, abstract class for every model, for every eloquent model or majority of eloquent models. There is a repository attached to that. So you can see on the left, there's abstract repository, which we are here now, then album, artist, playlist, song, user, and stuff like that. So there's a repository interface with rules. What needs to be implemented in every repository? Get one by ID, returning model, get by IDs collection, and get all collection. It's similar to Eloquent. one layer on top. It could be an over-engineering, you would argue, but let's see where it's actually used. So in the abstract repository, which implements the interface, so abstract class may have implementation. In the construct, we are guessing the model, and this is an interesting solution that I haven't seen anywhere else. The model class is trying to guess which model it is from model class, so abstract repository. Let's take a look. Album repository extends abstract repository, and from this name, the class will be able to guess which model it is. In here, self-guess model class. So there is regular expression of repositories blah 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 repository becomes blah 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 model. So this is kind of an internal magic to attach a specific model to that class, and then within that model you have that implemented get one by ID, get by IDs, and get all. And on top of that there may be additional methods like get first where, get model class. And then on the third level of the repository of, for example, album, there may be more methods, like in this case, get non-empty album IDs. If we go to media sync service again, same for the artist. Get non-empty artist IDs for the artist repository. Again, I would get back to my own thought of it may be over-engineering, so why would you use interface, then abstract repository, then specific repository for one method? It could be avoidable, but it's kind of a separation of concern again. So if we go to, for example, abstract repository and search for get by IDs where it is actually used, find usages, we have the usages. So there's this artist repository get by IDs. Would you be able to do that with Eloquent? Sure, but this is kind of another layer on top of Eloquent just in case you would implement the IDs somehow differently. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of repository pattern as such because Eloquent is already kind of ORM in Laravel, which is kind of a repository itself. But in this case, koel implemented the separation of concerns on a few levels, and everything is kind of separated. Maybe separated too much, that's personal opinion and personal preference. But the code is readable, clickable, and clear.